Hello and welcome to this week's opposition preview on the Last Word on Spurs. Delighted to be joined by Dave here, big Wolves fan. Dave, big game to come this weekend, Tottenham Hotspur against Wolves at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. I think it's fair to say that you've been a bit of a bogey team for Spurs over the course of the last 3 to 4 years. Never found it easy either up at Molineux or at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. Firstly, what have you made of Wolves' summer so far?
Yeah, I mean, the preseason has been interesting. We've seen a brand new system, formation for Wolves. Ever since, we had Nuno, obviously, who you guys are fairly familiar with. We always opted for this sort of back three, back five system. And we saw that from the Championship all the way up till last season. Even Bruno Lage sort of adopted that formation for last year. But Bruno Lage is sacked it off now. He's got rid of it. We've gone with a back four. That's why we've seen the likes of Connor Cody leave the club as well, because he just doesn't fit into the way that Wolves want to play now. And although, we haven't picked up a win yet this season, and we got a loss against Leeds, a draw against Fulham, there's signs there that it could work. But this weekend against Spurs, it's going to be the first big test for this new system, new formation. So we're intrigued, but as Wolves fans, we're looking forward to it as well.
Yeah, it's fair to say. I think it'd be interesting to see how the battle of these two teams play out. As I said last season, never an easy game, as we saw Wolves going away with all 3 points at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. Just want to know, obviously, thoughts in general. It's been an interesting summer for Wolves, obviously, in terms of, at the moment, bringing one big player into the club, losing maybe an influential player. Overall, what have you made of the last couple of weeks of the business for you guys, Dave? Are you fairly happy? Are you frustrated? Where do you
A
stand on
lot,
the summer window?
a lot happier now. If you asked me sort of 10 days ago, I would have been really disappointed. There's a lot of Wolves fans that were really upset with how almost slow the business was going. Ever since, again, bringing up Nuno, he always liked to have a thin and a small squad. And when we got into the Europa League 2 or 3 years ago, that was the time that the board really had to strengthen Wolves, and we didn't. And we've had really poor transfer windows. And fans were really disappointed again when we didn't see enough business quick enough. We'd signed Nathan Collins from Burnley fairly early on, but other than that, it had gone quiet. But from last week, we signed Gonzalo Guedes from Valencia, which we were all really excited about. And then one that came out, we've been linked with him on and off throughout the summer, but Mateus Nunes is coming from Sporting for in and around sort of £40 million, which is obviously our record signing, which is a huge signing for us. So we're really excited about him. But then one today is Morgan Gibbs-White, been linked with Forest all summer, but it looked like they'd cooled off their interest, and all of a sudden it looks like they're going for him as well. And I think the overall package is worth over £40 million, which is a ridiculous amount of money. I think that does include sort of unrealistic add-ons, but Wolves will definitely be getting at least £35 million out of that deal, which is a phenomenal piece of business. And when you look at both the Morgan Gibbs-White transfer and the Nunes transfer, we're sort of making a profit on Morgan Gibbs-White, so on both transfers. So, yeah, it's interesting. I think there's probably still room for one or two more big signings for Wolves. So I'm excited to see how the last couple of weeks of the window goes.
Interesting, just on Morgan Gibbs White. I mean, I've got to claim I haven't watched Wolves every week, as you can imagine. I catch the super cuts on Match of the Day. Just how much have you been impressed by him, and how big a loss is he for Wolves in general, given the kind of fee that Forest are paying?
It's strange because as Wolves fans, we saw him obviously 2 or 3 years ago when we were in the Premier League, and he never really set the world alight. He didn't get on fantastically with Nuno because he was out on loan at Swansea and did quite well. And Nuno recalled him and offered him game time and just didn't play him. So he was sort of upset about that. And that's when he went back out on loan last year with Sheffield United and did really well, got a really good amount of goals and assists. And Bruno Lage has made it clear all summer that he wants Morgan to be a big part of the team. He started our first two Premier League games. He was captain for a little bit during pre-season as well. He's been okay. I wouldn't say he's been the best player on the pitch in either of those games, but he hasn't been the worst either. I think for that amount of money, it's very hard to say no for a player that hasn't really proved it yet at the top level of English football. If you're being offered 35 to 40 million pounds, I think you've got to accept it. So overall, I don't think it's a huge loss for Wolves. I think Wolves will strengthen in the right areas using that money. But obviously, we wish him all the best. He's a player that's come through our academy. He's been here since the start of his football career.
Interested to get your thoughts generally on the expectations for the season, Dave. I mean, it's again, Wolves, a club that have been renowned sometimes for being a bit of a yo-yo club, but they've established themselves in the Premier League for quite a number of years. And
Yeah.
again, you've been flirting around the European places as well, as we've seen the last year or two. What's the expectation now? Bruno Lage, it does feel Wolves are maybe going in a different direction in terms of maybe the way they're playing their football. What's your thoughts overall?
I think again, a couple of weeks ago, I would have been more than happy with just a top half finish. As you saw last year, we were flirting with the top six, top seven, and because we didn't bolster the squad in January, we just sort of went downhill for the last couple of months of the season, unfortunately. Um, but yeah, now we're pushing and getting these big signings through the door. Maybe one or two big signings, and I think pushing for top seven is possibly a realistic target again. But um, yeah, Wolves fans are a lot more optimistic now than what we were maybe 48 hours ago. So things are looking up. And like I said, strengthen the squad a bit more and maybe top seven could be back on again.
Yeah, it's interesting. It'll be very interesting to see how those players bed in, obviously the ones you've made, and how they really adapt to the way Bruno Lage wants them to play. It does feel like you've got a number of, I say, Portuguese contingent there now, if I'm being honest with you, Dave. From the outside looking in, penalty shootouts, you should be okay in terms of the cup competitions, should they come around. Talk to me about this fixture then at the weekend, Tottenham Hotspur. I mean, what have you made of Spurs' summer window? And generally, yeah, what's your thoughts of coming to the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium on Saturday?
I think Spurs were in a similar position to us in the fact that their first 11 was really strong, but then sort of outside of that, Conte didn't really have many options to bring on. And we obviously not the same sort of stature as Spurs, but we had a similar sort of issue last year. And I think they've addressed that this year. And I'm sure Spurs will probably try and get maybe one or two more in. I don't know. But I think the squad overall is a lot stronger for Tottenham. It has to be with you being in the Champions League, which I think is a great achievement. And I caught the game on Sunday as well against Chelsea, where I think even Spurs fans know they probably weren't at their best. But the fact that you've still been able to come out with a half decent result out of that game sort of bodes well that you're still able to grind out these results. So Conte will want a reaction. It's not going to be easy for Wolves on Saturday. It's going to be a really difficult game, I think, against Spurs. But like you said, we've had fairly decent fortune away from home against you guys. You guys tend to get one over on us at Molineux. But it's going to be a really tough game. I think this is probably one of the strongest Spurs squads we've seen for a long, long time.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say, I totally agree with you. Listen, we were outplayed in large majority of periods up at Stamford Bridge, but this Spurs side at the moment are finding a way to grind out results, and I think again a lot of that down to Antonio Conte, just the magnitude of the guy, and I have to say, I've been really, really impressed by the way that he's almost got this Spurs side to play with courage, conviction, bravery.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's something to be of joy at the moment. As long as he's here, we have to enjoy him. I've been told
Sure.
don't fall in love with him. Enjoy him whilst he's here. It's hard to not fall in love with him when you just see that passion on the touchline like we saw at the weekend
Yeah.
at Stamford Bridge. Dave, how do you see Wolves lining up for this game in terms of players changes? What do you see maybe in difference to what we saw against Fulham last week?
Well, what I would have said is, well, like I said earlier, we're playing with a back four now. I would have assumed Morgan Gibbs White would have started, so obviously he's not going to be starting now. So I am intrigued to see how Wolves line up. Against Leeds and against Fulham, we played with like a 4-2-3-1. Against Tottenham, because it's a tougher opposition and away from home, we may switch that to a 4-3-3. So in terms of lineup, I think it would be Sarr in goal, Ait-Nouri left back, Johnny right back, Nathan Collins and Kilman as centre backs. Midfield two for sure, Dendoncker and Neves. Matinho's just coming back from an injury, so might play. If not, Mateus Nunes might get thrown in, for his debut straight away. And then a front three, I would assume, of Neto, Guedes, and Daniel Podence. But we've got players like Hwang who are in there. Raul Jimenez has been injured, but there's whispers that he might be back available for Saturday as well. We've got a really strong looking squad available for Saturday, thankfully.
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting to see, obviously, how these two sides do match up. I think there may be a bit of pressure on Wolves, given it's been a bit of a slow start, if I'm being honest with you, Dave. I know, again, Spurs never an easy venue to go, but given recent success at Tottenham, how would you feel going into the game for you? How do you feel based on Spurs' form, your form?
I always go into games like this positively, but I know Spurs are a good team, and like I said earlier, I think it is the strongest Spurs squad that we've seen for a number of years, and Conte will want a reaction, no doubt about it. So, I think it'll be a close game, but Wolves, if they want to win the match, have probably got to get off to a good start like we did last year. I think we caught Spurs by surprise. We scored those two early goals last time and almost killed off the game straight away.
Yep.
So because it's a new system for Wolves, I really don't know how we're going to approach this game, whether we're going to sit deep and try and counter you, or whether because we have got extra men forward, if we are going to try and go on the front foot in this match. That's why it's quite an intriguing match for Wolves fans to see.
Yeah, absolutely. Dave, finally, can we get a prediction? What do you reckon ahead of the weekend? What are we going to go for?
I'm going to use my heart for this one and say 1-1 draw.
Okay, all right, fair. Okay, well, Dave, listen, thank you so much for joining us on the Opposition View this week. Dave, where can we find your content on Wolves? Where can they tune and check you guys out?
Yeah, so we're at Talking Wolves everywhere, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. If you want to come and see our reaction after the game, whether Spurs win or obviously we get a win and you want to see what I thought about that, yeah, Talking Wolves on YouTube.
Amazing. Like I say, you'll find all those descriptions, links in the bottom of our YouTube podcast audio links below. Dave, thanks so much for joining us. Absolute pleasure.
My pleasure, man. Thanks for having me.
Thanks so much, Dave. Really, really appreciate it.